Someone once said, if your voice is loud, some people will listen. But if your message is strong, everyone will pay attention. Hi everyone, welcome to channel, and today I have an inspiring story for you.
On a cool autumn morning, a young boy stepped through the school gates, his eyes filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was his first day at a new school, a place where he hoped to find new horizons, new friends, and new lessons. But there was one thing he didn't know. This school had a special rule. Every student had to meditate before class began. No one had told him about this. As he entered the classroom, he saw all the students sitting silently, their eyes closed, their breaths slow and steady. There was no chatter, no last-minute flipping through textbooks, just a peaceful stillness that filled the entire room, as if time itself had paused. In that moment, he felt out of place. Then, the teacher approached him gently and said, "You need to meditate for half an hour before class as well." The boy hesitated. Meditate? He had never done that before. But not wanting to stand out, he reluctantly sat down, trying to copy the others. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. But within just 2 minutes, an unsettling feeling crept in. Small noises, someone shifting in their seat, a quiet cough from across the room suddenly felt magnified. The silence wasn't comforting. It was overwhelming. Annoyance bubbled up inside him. His eyes snapped open, frustration flashing across his face. He couldn't understand why everyone else seemed so calm while he felt so restless. At that moment, he didn't realize that this was just the beginning of a journey, one that would teach him the true meaning of inner peace. The boy tried to close his eyes, take a deep breath, and focus on his breathing like the other students. But within just 2 minutes, his mind started to feel restless. Every little sound around him suddenly became unbearably loud. Someone shifted in their seat, making the chair creak. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway. Somewhere in the room, a student cleared their throat. These tiny, seemingly insignificant noises felt like ripples disturbing the stillness he was desperately trying to hold on to. He tried to ignore them, but the more he fought against the distractions, the more irritated he became. The silence that others seemed to find so calming felt suffocating to him. How could they meditate with all this noise? He thought, his brows furrowing in frustration, unable to take it any longer. He snapped his eyes open and looked around, his face filled with annoyance. He wanted to stand up, to tell everyone that they were disturbing him, that meditating like this was pointless. But just as he was about to react, a teacher gently placed a hand on his shoulder and said in a calm voice, "Peace doesn't come from the silence around you. It comes from the stillness within you." The boy froze for a moment, letting the words sink in. Hesitantly, he sat back down and tried again. But within 2 minutes, the noises returned, and the anger inside him flared up once more. What he didn't realize was that this was just the beginning of a much greater lesson, a lesson about himself. 3 days passed, and every morning, the boy tried to meditate, only to be disturbed by the smallest sounds. Frustration built up inside him, making him feel helpless and exhausted. He couldn't understand how everyone else could sit so still and peaceful while he felt nothing but irritation and anger. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. One morning, after snapping his eyes open in frustration, he walked straight to his teacher and said, "Teacher, please tell everyone to stop talking or making any noise while we meditate. The noise drives me crazy. When someone disturbs me while I'm trying to meditate, I just want to scream. Sometimes I even feel like hitting them." His voice was filled with frustration. The teacher looked at him for a moment, then calmly replied, "You can go anywhere, but you can never stop people from making noise. There will always be sounds around you, and if you don't learn to control your anger, you will always feel disturbed, no matter where you are." The boy lowered his head, unsure of what to say. Seeing this, the teacher continued, "But if you truly want a quieter place, try meditating by the river. You won't hear people talking there." The boy's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. The next morning, he made his way to the river near the school. Standing before the vast, flowing water, he took a deep breath and sat down. "Maybe this time, I'll finally find peace," he thought. But little did he know, his journey was far from over. The next morning, the boy arrived at the river with a small glimmer of hope. This place felt peaceful. There were no chattering students, no creaking chairs, no one clearing their throat. Only the gentle flow of water, the cool breeze brushing against his skin. Carrying the scent of nature, he sat down on the soft grass, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to meditate. This time, he felt a little more at ease. But then, out of nowhere, a dog barked. His eyes snapped open, his brows furrowing in frustration. A man was walking along the riverbank with his dog. They weren't trying to disturb him, but the barking completely shattered his focus. He let out a sigh and forced himself to close his eyes again. Then, a bird chirped from a nearby tree. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. A fish jumped in the water, creating tiny ripples. Annoyance flared up inside him. Even here, I can't find peace, he thought angrily. He had left the classroom to escape the noise, yet nature itself seemed to refuse to give him the silence he longed for. For 3 days, he kept coming back to the river to meditate, but every day, something disturbed him: the sound of animals, the wind, the water. His frustration grew stronger with each passing day. I need a place that is truly quiet. A place with no people and no sounds at all, he thought. And then, an idea struck him. I'll go to the middle of the river. Early the next morning, the boy paddled a small boat to the middle of the river. The riverbanks faded into the distance, and along with them, all the familiar noises disappeared. No more voices, no barking dogs, no footsteps, just the calm, endless water and the vast sky above. He sat cross-legged in the tiny boat, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. This time, he felt a peace he had never known before. Nothing could disturb him now. Finally, he had found the perfect place to meditate. Day after day, the boy returned to the middle of the river. He relished the absolute silence, feeling as if he had escaped the noisy, chaotic world. Every time he closed his eyes, his breath grew softer and his mind settled into stillness. But then, one morning, as he was meditating like always, an unexpected sound broke the silence: a splash of water. He opened his eyes just in time to see another boat drifting toward him. Panicked, he shouted, "Don't come here, I am meditating." But there was no response. The boat kept moving closer until bam, it crashed into his. A surge of anger rose within him. Who dares to ruin my peace? His fists clenched as he prepared to lash out at the person responsible. But when he looked closer, he froze. The boat was empty. At that moment, his anger vanished, and in that very moment, he was about to learn the most important lesson of his life. The boy stared at the empty boat in front of him. The anger was still inside him, but now it had no one to be directed at. When the boat had drifted toward him and crashed into his, he was certain that someone had disturbed his peace on purpose. He had been ready to lash out at them, but now that he saw the boat was completely empty, he suddenly realized he had been angry at something that wasn't even at fault. In that moment, a wave of shame washed over him. His anger wasn't caused by noise, nor by others. It had come from within himself. Just as he was processing this, a man came running from the riverbank. Seeing him, the boy's frustration flared up again, and he yelled, "Is this your boat? Do you know that it just ruined my peace?" The man looked confused and replied, "No, I just came here to ask for directions." The boy froze. This time, there was no one to blame. Once again, his anger faded away, but he still wasn't satisfied. He paddled the boat to shore, determined to find its owner and unleash his frustration. But when he got there, he discovered that the boat had simply come loose and drifted into the river due to the wind. No one had been controlling it. No one was at fault. He stood there, deep in thought. When he had believed that someone was responsible for his anger, he had wanted revenge. But once he realized that no one had done anything wrong, his anger disappeared. On its own, maybe. If he started looking at things this way, he would never let anger control him again. The boy stood still, staring at the boat, his heart empty. All the intense emotions that had just surged within him, anger, frustration, disappointment, had now faded away. Like gentle waves dissolving into the shore, he recalled the moment the boat had crashed into his. If someone had been inside, he would have lashed out at them without hesitation. But the boat was empty, and the instant he realized that, his anger simply vanished. Suddenly, he understood something. In life, when someone does something that makes us angry, we immediately assume it's their fault. We blame them. We get upset. We want to strike back. But what if we saw the situation like this empty boat? What if no one had truly meant to harm us? If we could think this way, anger would have no reason to exist. He thought about all the times he had been angry before. In the classroom, when people talked during meditation. At the riverbank, when he heard the barking dog, the chirping birds. Every time he had believed that others were the problem. But maybe the real issue had never been the outside world, it had always been inside him. He took a deep breath, feeling the gentle breeze brush against his face. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what peace felt like. From that day on, whenever he felt anger rising within him, he asked himself, could this just be an empty boat? And just like the boat on the river, his anger quietly drifted away. From that day on, the boy was no longer the same angry child. He still went back to school, still meditated before every lesson. But this time, when someone made noise, he no longer felt irritated. When he heard the sound of a chair scraping, someone coughing softly, or quiet whispers, he simply took a deep breath and let it all pass, just like a boat drifting on the water, because he had learned that the world would never be completely silent. There would always be things beyond his control, but if he didn't let them bother him, they would no longer have power over him. One day, when a friend accidentally bumped into him, instead of getting angry, he simply smiled and said, "It's okay." The people around him were surprised. Was this really the same boy who used to get upset over the smallest noise during meditation? But he didn't mind their reactions. He had found true peace not in the world around him, but within himself. As time passed, he realized that life was full of empty boats, situations that made us angry, people who hurt us unintentionally. But if we understand that, sometimes, no one is truly at fault, our anger will naturally fade away, and from that single moment in the middle of the river, his life was forever changed. Years passed, and the boy grew into a man. Life took him to many places, introduced him to many people, and put him through countless challenges. But no matter where he went, the lesson he learned by the river all those years ago remained in his heart. One day, as he was walking down the street, someone rushed past him and accidentally knocked him down. In the past, he would have been furious, shouting at the person for their carelessness. But now, he simply got up, brushed the dust off his clothes, and kept walking. He smiled to himself and thought, maybe that was just an empty boat. Another time at work, someone made a mistake that caused him to suffer a loss. The old him would have fought back, argued,